Maundy Thursday is the name used to describe the last day of Jesus' life before he was crucified. The term Maundy comes from a Latin word that means commandment, referring to the command Jesus gave his disciples at his Last Supper with them, to love one another as he has loved us. Today, we are going to get a glimpse of the 5 events that took place on that Maundy Thursday.
He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him.
Here you have the King of Kings doing the lowliest of jobs. His disciples must have been confused. If anything, they should be washing his feet. Instead, a role reserved for the lowest servant was being done by God in the flesh.
He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I'm doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me."
It's understandable that of all the disciples, Peter was likely the most confused. For Peter, Jesus was to be a conquering king, not a lowly slave. But Jesus made it clear that if Peter wanted to identify with him, not only would he let Jesus wash his feet, but Peter would have to be willing to do the same for others. Peter may not have fully understood the lesson, at least not just yet.
Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "The one who is bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you." For he knew who was to betray him, and that is why he said, "Not all of you are clean."
In Scripture, this is mentioned as a side note, but it's extraordinary that while Jesus is modeling for his disciples what real love looks like, he knows that one of them is about to do the unthinkable and turn him over to the authorities to his ultimate execution.
When he had washed their feet, he put on his outer garments and resumed his place. He said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done to you. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another."
The disciples didn't understand it at the time, but Jesus had just modeled the servant leadership that would be the defining mark of their lives and ministry, and that he, the Messiah, came to serve, not to be served. It's the same sacrificial posture that Jesus has called all of us to, that we are to be the foot washers of our community. And he did all of this while knowing that in less than 24 hours, he would be hung on a Roman cross.
As they were eating, Jesus took the bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take and eat it. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them and said, "Drink from it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. But I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom."
If the disciples were confused by Jesus washing their feet, they must have been utterly perplexed at the words he said when he broke the bread and offered the cup. But as Jesus often did, he used symbolism to try and help his disciples understand the incomprehensible. In this case, using the bread and wine as a picture of the sacrifice, the death of his body, and the giving of his blood, that would be necessary to eradicate the power of sin and death once and for all. It was a direct correlation to the Old Testament Jewish tradition of the sacrificing of an animal to bring restoration from sin. And when we take the Lord's Supper today, it's an opportunity for us to not only look back at what Jesus has done for us on the cross, but also an opportunity to look forward to the future banquet meal that we will all enjoy at His table in heaven.
And he came out and proceeded, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives. And the disciples also followed him. Now when they arrived at the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not enter into temptation." And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and began to pray, saying, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Now an angel from heaven appeared to him, strengthening him. And being in agony, he was praying very fervently. And sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from the prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping from sorrow. And he said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray that you may not enter into temptation."
Jesus often retreated to a secluded place to pray and be with the Father. But in this trip, there is an agony within him. There is a different tone. The drops of blood that Jesus is sweating reveals that there is a weight to this journey unlike any other. The stress of knowing what is coming. The cross is near. The fulfillment of age-old prophecies are about to be realized. So he makes this time for himself and the Father. But there's also an urgency to this trip. He's trying to prepare his disciples for what is coming. But again, they're not understanding. It's like a parent trying to warn a child of impending danger that the child cannot see or is unaware of. He knows what's coming, and he's tried to tell the disciples. And he urges them to pray because they were not equipped or prepared for what was about to happen. As anguished as Jesus was about the pain and suffering the cross would bring, he was much more concerned about obedience and faithfulness. Jesus is fully God and fully man. His humanity wanted a way out, but his divinity couldn't stand the thought of eternity without you and me in it.
Then one of the 12, the man called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you?" So they weighed out 30 pieces of silver for him. And from that time he started looking for a good opportunity to betray him.
Remember in the upper room when Jesus said he knew the one who would betray him? That was just another puzzling moment for the disciples. How could any one of them betray their Lord? It seemed implausible. But it's at this moment in the garden that Jesus' words about being betrayed became a reality.
While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, suddenly arrived, and a large mob with swords and clubs was with him from the chief priests and the elders of the people. His betrayer had given them a sign. "The one I kiss, he's the man. Arrest him."
The scene was surreal, and it had all the markings of a cover-up. An arrest in the dead of night during the holiest of celebrations with the Sabbath approaching. But none of the keepers of the law seemed concerned. In fact, the two authoritative groups in Jerusalem, the Jewish religious leaders and the Roman government, both want Jesus out of the picture. Jesus' claims of authority were a perceived threat to the power of both groups.
At that moment, one of those with Jesus reached out his hand and drew a sword. He struck the high priest's servant and cut off his ear. Then Jesus told him, "Put your sword back in its place, because all who take up the sword will perish by the sword." Or do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will provide me here now more than 12 legions of angels? How then would the Scriptures be fulfilled that says it must happen this way?
That companion of Jesus who drew the sword? None other than Simon Peter. I guess you could give him credit for his feistiness, but all it got Peter was another correction from his Lord.
At that time Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come with swords and clubs as if I were a criminal to capture me? Every day I used to sit and teach in the temple, and you didn't arrest me. But all of this happened so that the writings of the prophets would be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and ran away.
Once again, despite his betrayal and humiliation, Jesus shows his disciples and the entire crowd that his kingdom is all about humility. And if that crowd had not been so bloodthirsty for their pound of flesh, some of them might have recognized that this indeed was a fulfillment of prophecy. As for the disciples, they became gripped with fear at seeing that they were now without their shepherd, and the only thing they knew to do was run. All of this leads up to one of the most humiliating deaths anyone could endure. The Roman cross wasn't just an execution. It was a long and excruciatingly painful process. The process was demeaning by design. It was reserved for the worst of criminals, with the purposeful intent of making anyone watching think twice about crossing the Roman Empire. There was nothing more brutal. Jesus was stripped bare, flogged until his skin so bloody that he was unrecognizable. Then he was hung high for all to see, all the while being mocked and spat upon. And the death? Well, it wasn't because of bleeding out from the inflicted wounds. This was death by asphyxiation, as the sentenced summoned all the strength they could muster to hold themselves up high enough on the cross to open their airways, only to fall back down and ultimately choke to death. But all of this was not futile.
And when you were dead in trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive with him and forgave us all our trespasses. He erased the certification of debt with its obligations that was against us and opposed to us, and has taken it out of the way by nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and disgraced them publicly. He triumphed over them by him.
This is where redemption took place. This is where the payment for our sin was made. With all of the prophecies fulfilled, culminating with the fulfillment of what Christ did on the cross, statistically, there is no other explanation than this is the Messiah that was promised hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Every drop of blood has brought restoration between God and man. The ultimate sacrifice was made, and our victory comes because 3 days after Jesus hung on that cross and died, he rose from the dead. The victory was won. Our victory was won. For God loved all of us so much that he gave his only Son to die and rise again for us. And if you believe in him, you will not ultimately perish, but will have everlasting life. Every drop of blood has brought restoration between God and man. The ultimate sacrifice was made. And our victory comes because 3 days after Jesus hung on that cross and died, he rose from the dead. The victory was won. I would like to invite you to Easter at the Creek. We have a Good Friday service at 7 p.m., as well as Easter services at 5 p.m. Saturday night, and 4 Sunday services at 8, 9:30, and 11 a.m., and at 12:30 p.m. If you can't join us in person for any of these services, we would love to have you join us here online. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a blessed Easter.